Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Have a seat, and let's start with the story of the mean landlord. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Landlord tries to keep security deposit. About 10 years ago, my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, and I moved from the area we went to college to an apartment near where we planned to start our careers. I say it was an apartment, but it was really the basement of a house that the landlord had walled off to create 2 apartments to rent. The place was kinda crappy, but the rent was cheap for the area, and we were close to work. Everything was fine for a few months, but the only parking for us was on the street out front. The couple that rented the upstairs apartment had rights to the garage and driveway. They paid more than we did. Suddenly, my car got a couple BS tickets for parking on the street. I'm guessing some butt clown cop needed to meet their quota, and my girlfriend's car got sideswiped in a hit and run. This crap had to stop, so we emailed the landlord, her preferred form of communication, to ask if there's anywhere safe for us to park. She replies, "Park anywhere you want." We had noticed that our upstairs neighbors usually eschewed the driveway to park in the front yard. They were horribly lazy, so we figured that would be a good spot for us too. We parked in the front yard for the rest of the year. We figured that would be the end of it. We finished our lease, left the place in better shape than we found it, and requested our $1,500 security deposit back. After a couple weeks, we got a check for $700. WTF? Since there was no explanation, we asked the landlord for one, and she replied that the deducted amount was to resod the lawn, claiming that parking on it had damaged it. Now, I was the one who cut the grass at this house while we stayed there, so I was well aware that the lawn was more weeds and bald spots than grass. Picture the African savanna in midsummer. No one had ever lifted a finger to landscape any part of the property, but the landlord wanted to sell the house once the leases were up, and she figured she could get the renters to pay for a nice new lawn. I complained to the landlord, didn't care. I put in a complaint with the local housing department, didn't care. I threatened to take her to court, didn't care. So that's what I did, took her to small claims court. I had never sued anyone before, so I was going in prepared. I took pictures of the entire front yard. The area that we damaged was actually one of the best patches of grass, though it did have a small rut that my tires made when the yard was muddy in the summer. I got testimonials from our upstairs and across the street neighbors. Most importantly, I printed out the email where the landlord told us to park anywhere. We were suing for $1,800 to cover court costs and us both missing a day of work on top of the full security deposit. In mediation, we said we'd settle for $1,400, but she must have thought she was in the right because she refused to offer a penny more than the original $700 check, which we never cashed. When we got in front of the judge, it was pretty clear that she had no evidence, hadn't prepared anything, and just assumed that us kids would fall on our faces. We did not. We put everything we had in front of the judge and made our claim. He was impressed. He stopped us when we showed him an email to ask the landlord, "Did you really tell them to park wherever they wanted?" When she said yes, the judge replied, "Then what are we even talking about?" And that was that. Judgment in full for us. And that bee had to pay to resod her own damn lawn. And our second story. The hassle of finding a new job. Background. I was working for a consulting company that had hired me after half a year of unemployment. I had over 5 years of experience in my field, yet they were only going to pay me as a junior because of a gap in my resume. This gap existed because of trying to start my own business and failing spectacularly at it. I did not want that on my resume. I had to basically grit my teeth and accept, hoping they would see my worth and give me a raise. Yeah, I know how that sounds. After about a year, I was done with that line of working. I had to switch projects a lot, which included new locations that were a big commute. I hated it. I started looking for a more stable job and found one pretty quickly. Interviews were going well. I was close to signing a contract when a colleague of mine called me asking if I'd be interested to come work on the same project as he was. I confided in him that I would be quitting soon and told him which company I was moving to. Big mistake. He starts panicking and tells me they used to work with that company. There could be a contract that forbids this company from stealing me away, as it were, because consultancies don't like it when their clients steal their employees. There was talk about fines too, big fines. I could be in a crap storm if I wasn't careful. I had to talk to both my current boss and the new company and ask them if they were absolutely sure that it was okay for me to switch jobs. This was awkward in itself, but I felt like I'd done my due diligence and would let them figure it out. I was asked to be kept in the loop because I had the right to be. This did not happen. I called and mailed, but either got ghosted or received a reply stating, "We'll let you know when we know more." This is where I got a bit petty. You see, I learned my lesson about telling people about my job prospects. There was another company very interested in me, but they were a bit on the slow side. I'd not told anyone about this. As fate would have it, they made me an offer right away when I was being ghosted by both the other and my current company. This offer was great. It was basically a no-brainer. I called them and told them I'll accept. We agreed on a meeting, and that was that. 1 hour after this, I got a phone call from my company saying they'd come to an agreement with the other company. I could switch jobs. But there was one condition. I had to finish the month at the current client. However, the month had just started, and I only had given a 2-week notice. They basically didn't include me on any of these talks and then decided that I would just do something I'm not required to do according to my contract. None of them even informed me or asked me if I even wanted to do this. I could have been the bigger man and said, "Yeah, sure, I'll finish the month," but then I'm actually switching to another company which is paying me more. Sorry. Instead, I told them what I thought about their practices, told them I'd be switching to another company, and they wasted their time because they didn't keep me informed, and that my 2-week notice would be in the mail. I got a mail about an exit interview, but funnily enough, that never took place. I wonder why. Been working at that new company for over 3 years now. And our last story. Annoying neighbor. AN equals annoying neighbor, MB equals Melbourne water guy. So just for a bit of context, my mom and dad own a plant nursery. From what I was told, our AN was a retired lawyer with too much time on his hands, and he lived just down the hall from us and owned a dam as well. So this happened a few years ago when I was in year 11 of high school, about mid-autumn. Keep in mind this is Australia, so it's bloody dry. We get a formal complaint from our AN. This isn't a big shock because at this stage, we were getting formal complaints from him every 2 weeks or so. Everything from too much noise to, yes, too little noise, our dog, our hill eroding, anything this guy could think of. It came in his usual lawyer-styled letters. Anyway, this guy had written us a letter claiming we had infected his water with blue-green algae, and we'd have to pay all the damages to his property, including vet bills for his horses. Now, my mom and dad were furious with this guy, for when we were having our dam built, this guy kept complaining about how the runoff from our pots would change the nutrient level in his water. So when Dad built this, he went all out. He had a natural filtration system with 2 smaller dams that all the water would go through first, filled with natural water filter plants, reeds and other plants. Then it would go through a chlorinator and finally a pumped filter. Every month, Dad would backwash mains and the dam to keep the dam at the right pH and pump the water constantly to keep it aerated. So my parents replied a flat no. So our neighbor makes his biggest mistake and calls Melbourne Water to look at our dam and to test the water. And guess who had to pay for the water testing fee? So MB gets there and is quite PO'd, for his coworker called in sick and he's going to have to collect water samples from all water inflows and overflows and the dam itself by himself, do salinity tests, pH tests, and send samples back to the lab for further testing. I thought it was interesting, for I was doing chemistry at the time, so I went out to talk to him about it. He looks at our setup, and to say the least, he was pretty impressed. He asked why this was getting reviewed, 1, due to how dry it is and how water isn't overflowing from our dam to his, and 2, why it's the neighbor getting reviewed due to he's the one with blue-green algae. He soon gets explained all the crap our neighbor gives us and expresses his sympathy. When he's about to finish up, he suddenly asks about the fence line that goes through the AN's dam. I tell him about how a few years back the neighbor had told us to reinstall our connecting fence in order to keep our dog in, and how Dad had to pay for it all. Dad was PO'd and decided to review over our property border and didn't give up a centimeter of land to this guy, even if it went through his dam. Now Melbourne Water smiles and says, "Well, I'll have to get a sample of that as well, won't I, since it is your water?" After this, he talks to my parents about our options and says that the review will be scheduled soon about the water contamination. By the way, I was not present for the meeting. Mom and Dad relayed the whole thing to me. Anyway, going on. So about a month later, the council had us sit down for a meeting with AN there, and all he knew was it was about contamination of water, and he's looking smug. Then it starts. MB goes on to state that the contamination did not come from our dam and likely came from AN horse poo runoff into his own dam, but without further testing on AN's property, there would be no conclusive evidence. AN just looks confused because why have a council meeting for this? But MB isn't done. He then goes on to state that there has been, in fact, contamination to our water from his, as we have a cubic meter of water coming across from his dam. I heard he just went pale as he realized what this meant for him. He would have to pay us for damage. He quickly got composure and claimed that we do not use that cubic meter of water and therefore have no damage. It was my mom's turn now. She got up and told the council she wanted to use this water for a water exhibit for our plants range for when the customers came over to look at our plants, but could not do so with the water contaminated. The council had already seen the plans and agreed. So the AN was then forced to pay for Melbourne Water to come out and determine where the contamination was, and then set up a filtration system similar to ours, which cost Dad about $20,000 to decontaminate the water so we could do our water garden. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.